Now for our daily review of the French papers. Diptyque Laurent is with me in studio. Diptyque, you're going to start with Libération, and that's focusing still on the sexual harassment issues in the wake of that Harvey Weinstein allegations.
That's right. Sexual harassment continues to make the front pages here in France. Sexual harassment and social media, you might say. The pigs are on the grill. That's what Libé says in its front page. Porc sur le grill. Really, those who abuse their positions of power are under scrutiny today, at least according to Libération. And the paper is looking at what it calls the meteoric rise of the success of that hashtag balance ton porc, or squeal on that pig, under which women have been tweeting their own experiences of sexual harassment in the workplace, in the streets, and in their daily lives. Let's listen to these women who've been harassed, who've been abused, who've been raped. Let's respect their courage for speaking out, because publicly taking on this role of victim is not easy. That's what Libération's editors say in their daily editorial. I quote, "It's time now to make gender equality a big national issue."
Indeed, and from the French version, there's a hashtag #MeToo that seems to have gone internationally viral as well. Le Parisien also looking at that issue of sexual harassment.
Well, Le Parisien is wondering if the Harvey Weinstein scandal has somehow allowed women to break this law of silence. Respect, the paper's editors say. To break this destructive nightmare, there needs to be a, quote, permanent apprenticeship of respecting one another. Really, it comes back down to basic human values, respecting each other. An idea that's really being sent up in this cartoon from Le Parisien, where you see the man on the left complaining that men can no longer joke around with their female colleagues. The man in the middle says, well, the only thing women will get for speaking up is the fact that they'll be replaced by men, to which the man on the right says, are you crazy? We pay men 20% more. Clearly, there's still a lot to change in the attitudes and values that are placed on women, especially in the workplace.
Indeed, a lot to be done on that question of equality, and that's something the magazine 20 Minutes or 20 Minutes is looking at.
Well, il y a encore du boulot. That's what 20 Minutes says on its front page. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a long way to go, because 20% of working women say they've been sexually harassed during their careers. That's according to a study that came out about 3 years ago. Yet, only 3 out of 10 women have actually reported incidents of sexual harassment to their bosses, so workplace sexual harassment. So you see that women are still overwhelmingly under-reporting cases of sexual harassment. Obviously, there is a whole plethora of reasons behind that. Now, what's interesting is that Libération has actually published an interview with one lawyer who really takes the kind of counterpoint, saying she doesn't really hail this whole public naming and shaming on social media. This lawyer is called Marie Dosé, and she's really questioning the real impact of social media mobilization in this article here. She says that guilt is not determined by social media or on social media. It's determined in the courts and by judges by adhering to these new rules of public denouncing on social media, while lapsing into the arbitrary, and I quote, tyranny is changing sides. Reducing a man to a pig, according to her, is as despicable as objectifying women itself.
And of course, for France at the minute, lawmakers are looking at possibly passing new legislation that would make even wolf whistling and things like that on the street harassment reportable as a police offence. But for many, the solution is really education.
Well, that's according to L'Obs, which is a website here in France. They're looking at what they call the education of children. What can and what should be done to change the attitudes, in particular, of men and boys. This article, how to raise your son so that he doesn't end up being sexist. According to this author cited by the website, it begins with a child's upbringing, because kids, I quote, recycle what they learn at home and what society teaches them. Things like don't challenge the social or gender norms, like a boy who has to justify wearing pink or purple because these are considered feminine colors. So the answer simply is to challenge those social and gender norms. Teach him to look after himself. Allow him to cry. And above all, teach him that the word girl or girly is not an insult.
And I guess educate women to not accept, perhaps, these kind of forms of abuse. So really, sexual harassment getting the mainstay of the coverage in the French papers, but there is one article you've seen in Le Croix looking at something very different, and it's daily life in North Korea.
That's right. North Korea is the focus of La Croix's front page. In fact, one of the journalists for La Croix has traveled to the secretive communist state to observe what life is like for them. Dorian Malovich traveled across 1,200 kilometers to interview Koreans in the countryside that he quotes that he calls, quote, poor but not entirely miserable. The reporter also notes a defiance of North Koreans against global isolation. Many say they're, for instance, ready to return to the, quote, Stone Age if necessary, and insist that continuing sanctions imposed by the West have not broken their resolve. They say they're just going to dig their heels deeper and fight against it.
I have to say, I find articles on North Korea always fascinating, and one wonders under what condition that reporter was allowed in or not. Deputy Laurent with a review of the French papers. Thanks very much indeed.